Okay, so this video I'm just kind of summing up my jiu-jitsu year in 2020. And I started off big. Your boy showed up on Keenan's YouTube channel. Check me out in the back. Upside down inverted, repping techniques. This was kind of a cool, short, brief trip that I actually took in January of 2020. I got to go to Legion, Keenan's new jiu-jitsu gym. And it was kind of cool because they were still in the first maybe 2 months of opening, maybe even less. So the gym wasn't really like fleshed out yet. It was a good opportunity to kind of, see how things are working down there, kind of study the environment, the class structure was kind of the things that I was more interested in than anything. I actually didn't get to roll with Keenan, even though I asked him to and I would have liked to, but he was just coming back from his performance at the 2020 European, so he was giving his body some rest. He was just teaching. But I would say the biggest thing I picked up at Legion, and from what I've been studying in jiu-jitsu for a number of years, is the biggest change I made to my own class structure this year was cutting out warm-ups. And by cutting out warm-ups, I mean like these type of warm-ups. I do think warming up is important, and I'll come back to that later. But these kind of like group warm-ups where you do jumping jacks and running circles and all this type of stuff, I'm not going to say it's completely pointless because I think there is some point to it. But if you want to really improve at jiu-jitsu and get better, which is what I'm trying to do, you got to cut this stuff out. There was no warm-ups at Legion. And I actually, from Zahabi, who's a trainer that I really respect and I listen to quite often, he just kind of broke it down and said, add it up over the course of a week. And so say you have a week, you train 5 days, and say you spend 15 minutes warming up every single class. So you could potentially be spending 75 minutes, over an hour a week, doing running in circles, doing jumping jacks, sit-ups, all this stuff. And I just think it's just totally not necessary. Like, you should just be practicing armbar escapes. You should be practicing kimuras. You should be practicing anything other than this type of stuff. This is kind of how I start all my classes now. I just, before the class or a day or two before, I'll kind of have an idea of what I'm going to do. I'll think of kind of like the building blocks or the basic moves from like whatever position that we're in. And I'll show something like that. It could be an arm drag. It could be a half guard sweep. It could be takedowns. It's good to switch it up. And the move should be basic enough that you can, it's not crazy. It doesn't take crazy brain power to try to figure out. And I know a lot of you may not be running your own classes right now, and that's fine. But it's just things to look for in a good instructor. Do they actually teach jiu-jitsu the whole class, or is it more of like an exercise class? I know for me, I want to try to get better and improve my technique. And personally, since cutting out like the group warm-ups, before I cut them out totally, I did just kind of shorten them. I just left in like the circle warm-up and cut out the lane drills. But I really noticed a difference in my own students, like kind of just getting right to the business and practicing the moves that you're actually going to use in jiu-jitsu. It's just going to make you a lot better. It gives you a lot more time to work, and you're not spending what's maybe like 65 hours a year in these warm-up drills. So if anything, that's kind of what I've made the biggest change in my own jiu-jitsu teaching structure, is to cut out the warm-ups. And it is worth mentioning that these circle warm-ups and that type of thing, they can have their place if it's like a beginner's class. If it's a brand new class and no one knows the intro moves, then that's the time to use kind of like a more circle warm-up, a more exercise-based warm-up. But if it's guys that are blue belts and up, I just don't see the point. Everyone knows how to bridge. Everyone knows how to shrimp. We need to practice the things that people aren't as good at. This whole like, should I cut out warm-ups totally? Should I leave warm-ups in? I kind of thought about this for the first few months. And then, after training at Legion and seeing some other trainers that I respect, how they don't do these same warm-ups, I cut it out. And kind of every year, like my birthday's in March, so I feel like that's kind of a good time to just kind of think about what I could improve on in terms of jiu-jitsu. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the mat. It can be off the mat. Like say one year I started messing around and trying to do more yoga before I previously just tried to kind of stretch when I could. I tried to make yoga more of like a thing that I do more regularly. It's also been like things like recovery. Like I've tried to focus on recovery more often than not. That led to me getting more regular massages and seeing like a chiropractor, just different things like this. You can always kind of look at things off the mat that can help you on the mat as well, because just training hard isn't necessarily going to give you the results that you want. It can definitely make you tough if you just go in and fight all the best guys and just train hard every day, but you're not going to get technically better. To get technically better, you have to work on techniques, work on areas that you're weak at, and make them the stronger areas of your game. You always have to be building. Another major thing that I tried to add this year was studying more video. I've gone through years in jiu-jitsu where I really didn't look at any video or pay too much attention to competitions, but I would say probably like 2017 is when I started to kind of get my passion back for studying videotape. So this year, And if you know the instructional game, you know just everyone and their dog has an instructional out now. And it's great. It's a really unique time in jiu-jitsu. But this year I really decided to narrow my focus when it comes to studying DVDs or online videos. And I really decided to just only study John Danaher and his students. And really, why? Because they do the best in competition, and if you watch any of the video, it's extremely well broken down and well thought out, and it's just shown very well. Say what you want about Danaher's teaching methods, you know, we all like to have a good laugh of how long-winded this guy can be, but really, if you can sit there and talk about an arm lock for 8 hours and like the different ways that you can apply it and do it and all the transitions that come from it, you really understand jiu-jitsu on a much deeper level than the average person. And I think that's just what Danaher does really, really well. He explains things really well, breaks them down. I learned a lot from his arm lock DVD, just how to properly apply breaking pressure to the arm. It's really like mind-blowing details for someone like me. And I've been a black belt for 4 years, you know. So you always have to keep an open mind, always be learning. Don't ever think that you know everything. Like, I've trained for a long time. I can beat your average person, but I still don't think that I know a lot. Like, you always have to keep that hunger to study more and to want to learn more. So, you know, I made a commitment to myself going forward. I'm only going to study the Danaher, the DDS guys' DVDs. Not saying I won't ever look at anything else apart from them, but I think the majority of what I study, and I study a lot, you know, like a couple hours a day, like multiple hours a week, I'm watching these videos and matches and stuff. And you got to look at who's the best around your weight class or who you kind of want to model yourself after. And who your coach is matters, who your instructor is matters. You have to kind of, on your own, be able to kind of assess what style is going to suit you the best. And I'm just playing some clips from the start of a couple of my classes from this year, and feel free to steal any of this, you know. This is just a good example of some stand-up warm-ups. Guys got the guys pummeling, doing single leg entries for warm-up. Again, nothing that's super complicated. It just kind of gets your head in the game, gets you going through the motions, getting you using moves that you're going to be using in the match. So yeah, March 2020, things are going great. You know, I wanted to do some competitions, and then COVID hit and screwed up the world for everyone. But I'm the type of person, you know, I'm always going to try to find the best in any situation. And I really feel like I've improved a lot since this lockdown stuff. And really what you have to do is you really have to try to focus on how you can improve with no or very limited training. And how you do that is by watching videotape. And like I said, I kind of rediscovered my passion for that a few years ago. And at least if you're watching video, your brain is focused on it. It's not like you're physically going through the motions, but it's almost like as close as you can get. At least if your mind is on jiu-jitsu and you're kind of seeing what's possible, you're seeing, oh yeah, I kind of do that like this, or I can do it a little bit differently. It's almost just as good as rolling. Like, the visualization of it is really, really important. So in previous lockdowns, current lockdowns, future lockdowns, you know, you got to try to find like a training bubble, a training partner or two that you're comfortable with, that you might have space to some mats in their basement. Go on Amazon and buy a couple mats, find a little space. You don't even need to be able to go all out and have a crazy roll. You just need enough space to be able to drill, move around a little bit, and just kind of keep things fresh in your mind. And if you're unable to do that, there's also other forms of exercise. Like in this current lockdown, I've been lifting weights a little bit because I haven't been able to train as much as I want. I've really focused on my stretching. I've been into my yoga routine pretty much every day. Running when the weather is nice is great for cardio. I also use the first lockdown as a time to really try to kind of play around with wrestling. And I just mean like shadow wrestling. Like, I was just watching a lot of amateur wrestling video and just trying to copy the movements and kind of move around, like literally just in my living room. I just kind of move things out of the way and just try to, like, you know, do a 5-minute round, 10-minute round. I've literally done 10-minute shadow wrestling rounds where I just try to kind of maintain stance, think about the person in front of me kind of bobbing and weaving, think about snapping their head down, trying to pull on their wrist, open up arm drags, different things like this. It might look a little silly, but a good shadow wrestling can take you a long way, because it's not something that we do a lot in class. I've been trying to add it more into my warm-ups, like I said, but it's just something that you can literally do almost anywhere for like a minute or two. Just kind of work on your stance, keep your elbows in, good bend in your knees. You can always do that. So that takes us to about July. July, we started bubble training. So you see my group there. I had a couple good people that I was training with, and I ended up doing one competition in 2020, the Rogue Grand Prix, which is a tournament for a championship belt. I've made a video on this before, how my match went, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but just competition in general. I really think it's really valuable. I know everyone's life circumstances is different. Everyone's age is different. Everyone's body is different. But I think everyone should push themselves to at least try competition. Most people I know grew up playing some type of sports. Hockey, soccer, it's pretty popular here in Canada. And I think you lose something when you don't have that competitiveness anymore, if you don't do anything like that. So I think it's great. And Jiu-Jitsu is very unique in that you can find people your own age and skill rank to compete against. It can be tough to do locally, but if you're actually interested in it, you can find an IBJJF tournament, go and say you're a 44-year-old dude. There's actually going to be a division with several other 44-year-olds in it, right? It can be tough to find that in Nova Scotia. Competition training is also great because it gives you a sense of purpose. I'm not someone that needs a lot of external motivation. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for like 13 years, pretty much every single day. I still feel as motivated as I ever did. But if you are someone that needs a little extra push, trying to set your sights on competition as a goal can be really helpful. And like I mentioned, this was my only match in 2020. And to me, it just made me realize you really have to compete when you're able to. You don't really know what the circumstances of the world are going to be tomorrow or next month. So I would say anytime you're on the fence about competing, should I or should I not, as long as you're healthy, just do it. So that match didn't go how I wanted it to. I actually suffered a bit of a knee injury, so I was out for the better part of a month. But then we came back with the COVID Classic, which was an in-house tournament where we had all the students competing in a large bracket against each other. This was not my idea. This is the brainchild of Josh Whalen, but I was the one that set the bracket, and I tried to make the matchups as kind of fair and entertaining as possible. And just some kind of final thoughts on the COVID Classic and, just competition in general. You can't be afraid to lose. I feel like this holds a lot of people back. They feel like they're going to be embarrassed in competition, and it's just something you kind of have to get out of your head. Always with my own competition, my own history, like for me, I'll think like, what's the worst thing that can happen to me in this competition? Like I go out and get submitted in say like 10 seconds. And honestly, like even if that were to happen, like people they're not really going to remember it. Think about any of the really good jiu-jitsu players that you know. You probably think of their wins and their submissions. No one is undefeated in this sport. I have people that I really admire and I look up to, and they've lost more than they can count, and so have I. So I think that's really important. Don't be afraid to lose. Don't be afraid to go out and embarrass yourself. You have to go out and try, otherwise you're never going to get anything done. And another thing is people a lot of times think you're only as good as your last result, and that is 100% not true. This is more notorious in like UFC, MMA, where you see a guy lose a fight, and they're like, that guy's washed up, he stinks. But it's just not true. You just, like I've said before, you're kind of the result of all your experiences and all your competition history. You can't just go by your last match, because then you'll just be frustrated. You can't change the result. If you lost, you're just always going to keep thinking about it. It's going to eat you up. There's rivalries in jiu-jitsu. Rafa Mendes and Cobrinha have competed against each other 14 times. So I hate hearing people cry about rematches. Even in the gym, when people are like, I already rolled with that person last time. Like, it just blows me away. Like, for me, I will take a rematch multiple times in a row because it shows me how I can improve from the last time. Maybe I beat the guy 2-0. Maybe this time I beat him 4-0. That's an improvement. Maybe next time I'll submit him. Should also be mentioned that pacing yourself seemed to be a big issue with this tournament. I think the majority of the competitors in it likely spent most of their gas tank within the first 2 minutes. It's an issue that largely comes with experience, but you really have to learn how to manage your own gas tank and kind of let the foot off the gas for the first minute or two. And really, people can only explode so much. You might only have 2 or 3 explosive movements in you before you really got to recharge your batteries. So try to think of it like that, like a gas tank. Also with experience, I think it goes with it that if you want to get good at competing, you have to do it. You're not going to get good at anything creative or any type of sport. Like say, I don't know, drawing. Like you wouldn't draw one picture a year and then think that you're good at drawing. You have to do it consistently. Same with any sport. If you want to play hockey, you've never played before, and you only play once every 2 months. Like, are you going to get good? Probably not. So it really depends on everyone's personal goals, but if you want to be a good competitor, you have to compete, and you have to get over the nerves and the fear of losing, and you have to just get after it and just go and do it. People will always respect you for trying. That brings us to about September, October. The gym switched locations to a much bigger space. The only thing that really new that I added in the new location was we have a Facebook group, and I started sharing the class notes that I have with my students, and they seem to to really enjoy that. And it's just a good way to kind of summarize things. I just always call it a weekly summary, where I'll post kind of what we did, kind of number the techniques. Usually do 3 to 4 techniques per class. So it gives me a good outline of how the next class will likely go, and kind of gives you a refresher of, oh, okay, that's kind of what we did last time. Here was the common theme for the week. It just helps reinforce what you did. Because I know a lot of the time, my first few years in jiu-jitsu, I never took any notes or anything, and sometimes you just kind of feel like you're throwing stuff against the wall. It's impossible for you to remember everything, so it's really good to have a list of techniques that you can look back, refresh, and now you have a new technique you can put to your game that used to be old. With the notes, I kind of noticed that spending more time in one topic, like say omoplata, triangle, guard passing, it could be basically anything, but I've been trying to keep a whole week focused on one certain area, sometimes even more depending on what the topic is. But we did omoplata for 2 weeks, various setups, finishes, escapes, counters, and it's good to get that in depth on one particular technique. I heard John Danaher talk about depth versus breadth, and he was talking about it in, say, in my position right now. Like, I want to have quite a deep knowledge of guard passing. I'm trying to pass Tyler's guard in the clip. So I need to know a lot about the knee cut in particular if I want to use like this variation of a pass. In Tyler's situation, he needs to know a lot about a little. He needs to kind of quickly recognize the knee cut pass, quickly recognize the stack pass, and then you're a lot more likely to shut it down if you know what's coming. So if that makes sense, kind of depth versus breadth, you kind of need to know a lot about the particular move that you're using. Defense, you need to know a little about a lot. You need to be able to quickly identify what type of guard pass your partner is using, and then go into steps to stop it. Few final points. We've been recording a lot of the classes starting in 2020, and thanks to Mike Mussolino, this was his idea, and he's the one that takes the time to set everything up, record the classes, and send them to those who are interested in. And this is an amazing tool, especially for me as a coach. You know, I'm still fairly young. I like to get after it, and I like to roll, man. Like, I don't want to just sit on the sidelines and watch everyone. But from a coaching perspective, that makes things very difficult because I can't watch what everyone's doing. This is really cool for me because I can teach a class, go home and watch it, or watch it that night, and I can watch all the rounds. It really helps me with kind of building the curriculum in my head of kind of where we need to go next, because I can see where guys need to improve the most. And you also get the benefit of watching yourself, which I've mentioned before, video just doesn't lie, and it's honestly the best way to improve. A lot of times how you picture the roll went in your head can often be quite different than how it actually went, and you're just going to get the most direct, honest feedback that you possibly can by watching video of your recent matches or rolls. Finally, looking ahead to 2021, right now we're pretty close to Christmas. We're just a few days away. Nova Scotia is still kind of just getting out of its kind of second lockdown. Everyone's pretty excited because we're reopening the gym on Monday. I feel pretty good about the direction that I'm going as an instructor. Like I said before, you always want to try to keep improving. So something that I plan on doing in 2021, trying to provide some more rolling commentaries for the guys, and trying to grow this YouTube channel. I think that it helps kind of provide some insights, just kind of where my head is at. It's tough to have goals as a competitor right now because travel is just so uncertain. But things that would interest me in the future are competitions like the ADCC trials. I think would be awesome. Any type of open where I'm going to get to compete against some of the higher level adult competitors would be great. I'd also love a shot or two at Masters Worlds. Anything where I can get out and compete against some of the best athletes in jiu-jitsu, I'm always going to show up. And even locally, I'm always interested in competing against some of the better guys around here. Rogue puts on great events. Shout out to them. I'd be happy to compete again for the belts, the tournament that they have again for next year. And, you know, I'm always up for a challenge. So even though 2020 was pretty bad for most people, I still try to find the bright side in that I was still able to train jiu-jitsu for a lot of the year, have a lot of good students, make a lot of good connections. So yeah, you gotta look on the bright side of things, and let's look forward to what 2021 brings in terms of jiu-jitsu training. And remember, just don't ever stop learning, and just always be curious. So thanks for listening.